Hey reading friends, it's April 5th. This weekend would be the NCAA basketball championships, and in our house we believe that the University of Kansas Jayhawks would be winning, so I'm cheering them on in spirit even though they didn't get to play this year. We're ready for chapter 7 in the Trumpet of the Swan. A few days after the swans arrived at their winter home on the Red Rock Lakes, Lewis had an idea. He decided that since he was unable to use his voice, he should learn how to read and write. If I'm defective in one respect, he said to himself, I should try and develop myself along other lines. I will learn to read and write. Then I will hang a small slate around my neck and carry a chalk pencil. In that way, I will be able to communicate with anyone who can read. Lewis liked company, and he already had many friends on the lakes. The place was a refuge for water birds, swans, geese, ducks, and other waterfowl. They lived there because it was a safe place, and because the water stayed warm even in the coldest winter weather. Lewis was greatly admired for his ability as a swimmer. He liked to compete with other Signettes to see who could swim underwater the greatest distance and stay down the longest. When Lewis had fully made up his mind about learning to read and write, he decided to visit Sam Beaver and get help from him. Perhaps, thought Lewis, Sam will let me go to school with him, and the teacher will show me how to write. The idea excited him. He wondered whether a young swan would be accepted in a classroom of children. He wondered whether it was hard to learn to read. Most of all, he wondered whether he could find Sam. Montana is a big state, and he wasn't even sure Sam lived in Montana, but he hoped he did. Next morning, when his parents were not looking, Lewis took off into the air. He flew northeast. When he came to the Yellowstone River, he followed it to the sweetgrass country. When he saw a town beneath him, he landed next to the schoolhouse and waited for the boys and girls to be let out. Lewis looked at every boy hoping to see Sam, but Sam wasn't there. Wrong town, wrong school, thought Lewis. I'll try again. He flew off, found another town, and located the school. But all the boys and girls had gone home for the day. I'll just have a look around anyway, thought Lewis. He didn't dare walk down the main street for fear somebody would shoot him. Instead, he took to the air and circled around, flying low and looking carefully at every boy in sight. After about 10 minutes, he saw a ranch house where a boy was splitting wood near the kitchen door. The boy had black hair. Lewis glided down. I'm lucky, he thought. It's Sam. When Sam saw the swan, he laid down his axe and stood perfectly still. Lewis walked up timidly, then reached down and untied Sam's shoelace. Hello, said Sam in a friendly voice. Lewis tried to say "Coho," but not a sound came from his throat. I know you, said Sam. You're the one that never said anything and used to pull my shoelace. Lewis nodded. I'm glad to see you, said Sam. What can I do for you? Lewis just stared straight ahead. Are you hungry? Asked Sam. Lewis shook his head. Thirsty? Lewis shook his head. Do you want to stay overnight with us here at the ranch? Asked Sam. Lewis nodded his head and jumped up and down. Okay, said Sam. We have plenty of room. It's just a question of getting my father's permission. Sam picked up his axe, laid a stick of wood on the chopping block, and split the stick neatly down the middle. He looked at Lewis. There's something wrong with your voice, isn't there? He asked. Lewis nodded, pumping his neck up and down hard. He knew Sam was his friend, although he didn't know that Sam had once saved his mother's life. In a few minutes, Mr. Beaver rode into the yard on a cow pony He got off and tied his pony to a rail. "What have you got there?" he asked Sam. "It's a young trumpeter swan," said Sam. "He's only a few months old. Will you let me keep him a while?" "Well," said Mr. Beaver, "I think it's against the law to hold one of these wild birds in captivity. But I'll phone the game warden and see what he says. If he says yes, you can keep him." "Tell the warden the swan has something the matter with him," called Sam as his father started toward the house. "What's wrong with him?" asked his father. "He has a speech problem," replied Sam. "Something's wrong with his throat." "What are you talking about? Who ever heard of a swan with a speech problem?" "Well," said Sam, "this is a trumpeter swan that can't trumpet. He's defective. He can't make a sound." Mr. Beaver looked at his son as though he didn't know whether to believe him or not. But he went into the house. In a few minutes he came back. "The warden says you can keep the young swan here for a while if you can help him. But sooner or later the bird will have to go back to the Red Rock Lakes where he belongs. The warden said he wouldn't let just anybody have a young swan, but he'd let you have one because you understand about birds, and he trusts you. That's quite a compliment, son." Mr. Beaver looked pleased. Sam looked happy. Louis looked greatly relieved. After a while, everyone went into supper in the kitchen of the ranch house. Mrs. Beaver allowed Louis to stand beside Sam's chair. They fed him some corn and some oats, which tasted good. When Sam was ready for bed, he wanted Louis to sleep in his room with him, but Mrs. Beaver said no. "He'll mess up the room. He's no canary. He's enormous. Put the bird out in the barn. He can sleep in one of the empty stalls. The horses won't mind."